get by. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. And today is no different. We're here with Peter Billmeyer and of Bespoke Commercial Real Estate. I'm going to formally introduce Peter in a second. But Peter, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out on the podcast. And this is going to go on the Rising Entrepreneurs podcast, as well as Inspired Insider podcast. And I have to highlight a few other amazing EO members that I've had on the podcast. Andrea Houston, Lead Like a Woman, Becky Galvez, who's also in Chicago, Candor Threads. And there's other episodes that are fun. Like I had the founder, a co-founder of Pixar on. He talked about Steve Jobs stories. And so check everything out on InspiredInsider.com or Rising Entrepreneurs. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships. And how do we do that? We help you run your podcast, right? For me, Peter, and I know this is the same case for you, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. I found no better way to do that over the past decade to profile the people and companies I admire on my podcast and shout from the rooftops of what they're working on and what they're doing. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com, email us. Happy to answer anything that you throw at us. And I'm excited today. We have Peter Billmeyer. He's co-founder of Bespoke Commercial Real Estate and founder of Bespoke Limited Ventures. And what they do is they focus exclusively on working with other entrepreneurs, helping to facilitate all of their real estate needs pertaining to office or industrial. You could talk, you name it, right? They find it, they negotiate it, they finalize it, they extend custom real estate solutions, whatever you need, you can contact them. Through their years of ownership, they bring that level of knowledge that a typical broker just cannot match because of their experience. It's at BESPOKECRE.com. And in addition, he got a business degree from Oregon State University, and he was an academic All-American and a 4-year starter, 3-year captain of the soccer team, and played professionally. Peter, thanks for joining me.
Wonderful to be here.
So just start off in, I summarized it a little bit, but give us a little more color about your company and what you do.
We founded Bespoke almost exactly 8 years ago, recognizing that our industry has gone through a pretty consolidated journey where a lot of the kind of boutique and more specific shops have been purchased by the large, huge international publicly traded firms. And through that, we felt that there created a pretty significant void for entrepreneurs. You very well know, business owners, we just don't have enough resources to be great at everything. So by not having that extremely deep bench, you've got to trust on strategic partners and vendors and those relationships. And so we recognize that sometimes that trust is being misplaced, to be very candid. When you have a firm that works on both sides of a transaction, if you're a 10,000 foot user and it's a 500,000 square foot building, you have to ask sometimes who's the real client. By never working with landlords, we remove that conflict right off the bat, but also by not doing the publicly traded and things that we weren't A, passionate about, and B, wasn't really our niche and our fit, we get to zero in and be laser focused and be true specialists versus, a jack of all trades, master of nothing.
I want to dig deeper on the niching because you say it so clearly, and it's not always easy to make that decision because there's probably lots of different clients coming to you, right? And so you have to, at some point, I think it takes a lot of discipline to draw a line in the sand to decide that. Was there a point that you decide, okay, we're only focusing on this, or was that a decision from the beginning?
It was honestly from the beginning. I'm the son of an entrepreneur, and so is my business partner. We really zeroed in on kind of this niche. We do maybe about 5% of our P&L is nonprofit, and that's kind of more just labors of love. It's the compensation and then the expectations and effort that goes into those relationships are definitely inverted, but the quality of work, the importance of what they contribute to society, I mean, it's something you have to do. But yeah, I mean, I just am so in love with business and entrepreneurship and helping, anyone that has the audacity to risk everything and build something. They have my highest respect, and I will go to the very ends of our capabilities to help them because they deserve it. And it's the backbone of our country, from wealth generation to hiring and employing people. It's incredible. There's a phenomenal post that I would want everybody to look at today on a wonderful entrepreneur named Tom Gimbel. He posted on LinkedIn talking about Citadel. And, Ken Griffin gets a lot of crap. He gets a lot of negative publicity. He never seems to get recognized for the wonderful companies that he has built and the, immense wealth that he has generated, not only for himself, which clearly he's done very well, but for, how about the city of Chicago? How about the city of New York? How about all of those employees that work for him? And, Tom compared him to another company, which we don't really need to name, that's a startup. They're definitely further down the path than just being a startup, but they're quote unquote unicorn, where they just announced they're going to lay off, I believe, 20% of their workforce. Great company, great people, nothing negative to say about them, but yet they're the darling of the media. And, to me, I don't want to go so far as to say it's a hypocrisy, but, look, both entrepreneurs, both leaders deserve a heck of a lot of respect. They built something. They're trying to add value. And for me, that's just something that I don't think gets talked about and revered as much as it should.
Yeah. Yeah. I love hearing you talk about these topics because I just get that feeling of passion that exudes when you talk about entrepreneurs. And you said you're the son of an entrepreneur. Talk about some of the lessons learned there.
All right, fine. How about we start with learning how to do laundry in 7th grade? So my mom, she built an unbelievable educational consulting business. She, not too dissimilar to you, but PhD in education. She was a literacy specialist, so she was a 4-time published author. She would travel around the world presenting to educators for staff development days, essentially teaching teachers how to be better. And so, she had her staff underneath her that would handle some of her consulting, but 5 days a week she was on the road. I saw how hard she worked. I saw how it took a toll on her body physically and certainly mentally. The travel, the stress, and the part that resonates the most with me, and this is the journey that I'm on, being the father of 3 little boys. I think, when I talk about entrepreneurship, I have 2 really key points that I always talk about with someone that's thinking about getting into it, or when I'm mentoring someone. And number 1, being an entrepreneur is exactly like having a child. You can read all the books, you can talk about it nonstop, you can seek all this advice, but until that child comes into this world, you have no clue what the heck is really going to happen and what's really going on. And being an entrepreneur is the exact same thing. You learn business class, you can get your MBA, but until you walk through that door, and the first couple of months, you're so high on adrenaline and scared out of your minds, and you go through your journey of the imposter syndrome and all those pieces. But the stress, the exhilaration, the responsibility, they all get kind of thrown in this blender into this magical elixir, and you have great days and bad days. And I learned a lot of those formative lessons from watching my mom, and I am just forever thankful because as a true entrepreneur growing a business, it's really first gear and fifth gear. There's no in between. You are either sleeping or you are grinding. And the second part that I learned from her, which is by far the most excruciating, you kind of get to spin 3 plates in this world. You spin your business, you spin your family if you're blessed enough to have one, and then if you have a partner. And And I'll be damned if I can get all three plates spinning to a healthy RPM for more than 2 days, I'm living pretty well, because there's some instance, some thing that's going to happen and is going to disrupt. And, then you've got to really zero in your focus. And sometimes it's your kid, misbehaving and getting in trouble at school, or sometimes it's a client causing you problems, or sometimes it's your wife being upset with you. I mean, not that that ever happens to husbands,
Never happens.
And so I really watched, I think at the time, obviously I was too young to really grasp what was going on. And so I don't want to say it was osmosis, but over a decent amount of wine, my mom and I have been able to sit down and really unpack what a lot of that was. And unequivocally, I am not where I am today from a business success standpoint without that mentorship and modeling. So it's just a gift that I am so insanely thankful for.
Peter, when you were younger, did you know you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Was it professional athlete and entrepreneur? What were you thinking when you were the younger Peter? What did he want to do?
This is probably why I had such limited success as a pro athlete. I loved the sport. I was definitely committed to trying to play professionally. It wasn't the end all be all for me. And I recognized that, I was raised where education was extremely important. I took it serious in college and studied, and I loved business. But really what I learned, and this was very fortuitous because it was completely by instinct and natural. And now this is my number one thing that I try to explain to the younger men and women that I mentor and try to help foster their careers. I just knew what my non-negotiables were. I'm super lucky to have an older brother that's arguably 7.5 years older than me, extremely successful as a surgeon, and I always looked up to him and his friends, and I just knew that I wanted to keep up. I wanted to earn my ability to be in that room with his friends. I never wanted to have to say no. And so what it really comes down to was autonomy. And nothing means more to me than autonomy. I never wanted to have to say no to going on a vacation. I never wanted to have to miss, if my son or daughter was sick at school, being able to go pick them up or watch their games or coach or, and so while that's obviously the cornerstone of kind of my career, it is also in pretty big conflict with building a business. And so that reconciliation is where I struggle. But I liked leadership growing up. And I didn't know what business I really wanted to be in. And I honestly serendipitously fell into this world and then the role that I've been able to create for myself, which I think if there's a cooler job out there than what I get to do, I want to hear about it, because I get to spend all of my time being around other entrepreneurs. And what an unbelievable wealth of knowledge, a vast amount of resources. You get to do such fun and cool and entertaining, things. It's every day is different. And it's just great. I mean, again, back to the respect I have for so many entrepreneurs, and you get to meet tons of them, and that information, that knowledge, that experience that I get to learn and lean on, I get to then be a direct conduit to a lot of our clients, where if we do a great job in real estate, that's wonderful, and that's our job and our expectation. But if we can then come back around and do a great job helping them build their businesses, further their interests, all those different pieces, that's really living our code and kind of our core values. And that's the stuff that gets me super excited.
Peter, are there other non-negotiables that you thought about in your journey? You mentioned autonomy. Are there any others?
Yeah, it's cliche, and it's kind of I don't want to say uncouth, because it's not quite that bad, but I wanted to be in a position where I could take the risk, and no one was going to tell me how much money I could make. I had some pretty cool lessons watching what I would consider an extremely talented salesperson still to this day, just off the charts. And every year he would finish number one in his company. And I'll be damned if every year they didn't take away either his biggest, second biggest, or third biggest client and redistribute it throughout the company to someone else because, quote unquote, he was making too much money. To me,
control over your own destiny.
Yeah, that was a big piece. And, the great tail end of that story is it burned him out. He got so frustrated, he left and went and worked for one of his very good friends, where he still is the number one salesperson in that company doing the exact same thing, making 4x more, having 8x more fun. And it's just another amazing Chicago success story. And so, for me, I'm okay taking risk. And that's a big part of it. I think anybody that really wants to get ahead financially, it always comes down to risk. Always.
Peter, you mentioned, business partnerships are like marriages, right? And I think your brother's journey led you to meet your business partner.
That's exactly right. So Victor started hazing me in about 7th grade, and they were fraternity brothers at Iowa, and I got to know him. And I think you're exactly right. It is like a marriage. I think, regardless of having a male and having a husband or a hetero or whatever, the dynamic, you never want to marry yourself. And it's 100% true with my relationship with my wife, where Audra, she is not me. She keeps me grounded. She beats me into place when I need to be. And Victor is very similar. He's a unbelievably calculated, even keel, just tremendous deal person. And it's not a stretch to say that I was never very good at being a broker. It's not my strength. And so it's created a wonderful symbiotic partnership where we complement each other. And, I definitely believe that a business partnership can be one of the hardest things to pull off. But if you do it successfully, there's no doubt that it's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 = 4. And it's really been fun to be in the trenches together, trying to build this business and grind out together, because knowing someone has your back it makes it a little bit less lonely at the top.
Are there certain things you do, for people who are in a business partnership to help navigate challenges or navigate where the partners are not in complete agreement?
Bottle of booze and a whiteboard. I'm not joking. That's what I call it. And I will try sometimes to mediate where you give them a little bit of homework prior to, and you say, I want you to list out all of the responsibilities that you feel end at your office personally. And when you get them in a room together and you start listing these things out, it's fascinating. I mean, it can go spectacularly wrong, don't get me wrong, but most of the time when you'll see two partners put up the exact same responsibility, and it's like, whoa, wait, wait. And then all of a sudden you get to start bringing clarity. And from that, then what we try to do is we try to build a roadmap, and you try to divide up those responsibilities. And usually you have a pretty darn positive impact on their company. And, you check back in a year and how are things going? And it's, obviously you're always available if they want to call and reach out, but it's just, it's communication and clarity can really help clean up a lot of issues in a partnership.
So it's somewhat of a division of labor. Like one person is going to be in charge of it. And if there's overlap, that's where the conflict tends to occur.
Yeah. And it's incredibly inefficient. The duplication of efforts. Now, there are huge decisions sometimes that you have to be 100% committed on, and even after this long with running this business and there's moments when Vic's like, yeah, you just handle it. I trust you. And I'm like, no. This is one of those where you're gonna focus on these documents. We're gonna talk through the pros and cons, because I want full buy-in based on whether it's the dollar amount, whether it's the time commitment, whether it's, and I think, the other part about that is you got to be able to call each other on your BS, and you got to humbly take it. We just ironically this morning we had a bit of a back and forth between us that we cleared up some stuff, and I think we're better for it. It's not personal. You can't make it personal. It's because it's really not about Victor and I. And in the instance of our business, we have all these different people that rely on us. One of our brokers has got his second kid coming in 2 weeks, and that weighs on you. So it's much bigger than just us and our egos and all those things. So if you keep it in perspective, it always makes it easier to receive, process, and adapt from critical feedback, if you will.
Peter, I want to talk about the evolution of the team. I know for you, culture is really important. I even, the clients that you work with, you help them with culture. I mean, through their space. I heard one person say, the way that you help them develop their space actually has improved their company culture. So I'd love to hear about, just from the standpoint of the company, what does the evolution of the team look like as you've grown?
What a great question. Wow. So culture is everything to us. Our tagline, our trademark tagline is real estate's your down payment on culture. And we strive every day to get our clients to understand that instead of looking at your either, debt payment or your rent payment as an expense on your P&L, it needs to be an asset. And if leveraged correctly, the impact it can have on your company is off the charts. Prior to us kind of starting this, you and I were talking about a deal that we just recently completed, which is for SIOR, and they're one of the largest, probably held, if not the, in North America for student housing. And Rob Bronstein is absolutely brilliant. He's got a great business, financial, and real estate mind. And I've watched the evolution of his company, where the deal we just finished was what I'm still kind of shocked, but it was a re-up of an even better space than his current, which to me is still one of the coolest spaces in all of Chicago. And what that really distills down to is, the brass tacks about what it really means to a business owner, to a client. There's a lot of brokers that like to throw around a bunch of stuff about recruitment and retainment, and it's all a bunch of garbage. It does matter, but what it's about when you're the owner, when you're the one that's making payroll and doing all those things, it's about productivity. It's very, very, very unproductive to have a terrible culture, to lose employees and have a revolving door, to have people come in begrudgingly at 8:30 and run out the door at 5. All those things incestuously build on each other and pollute and contaminate. So if you can create a physical environment where your team wants to be there, and talk about timing. I mean, this is Welcome Back Chicago Week. It's so fortuitous that we're having this conversation today. We're hopefully coming out of this pandemic. And if you can create these physical environments, it is the most special thing, because you're going to build a culture where, hey, Jeremy, how's your dad? I heard you have, it's those magical moments. It's the silence between notes and music. When you're in the kitchen grabbing a snack or doing something, it's not about the snack. That's not all this crap gets put in the paper. It's about human interaction, and we need it. We need it now more than ever. We are so in a mental health crisis from this pandemic, from being isolated, from being under duress and stress. Suicide rates, hospital, visits. It's all just skyrocketing. And, if you look at it, you create an environment where people want to come. They do their work. They get the verbal, and even more importantly, sometimes the visual affirmation of a job well done. That does not exist on Zoom. It will never come through with the same type of emotion that it does in person-to-person interaction. And so when we really look at a client's face, we want to be as efficient as possible. We want to try to get the best deal possible, but we want to create an environment where the team is going to come, they're going to do their work, and they like to stick around. And it's such an amazing exercise when I will sit with a client in their space where they have never thought of this concept, and they think, we're so lucky in Chicago. They think that we're just trying to get them to spend more money. And in Chicago, it's one of the few markets in the country, our commissions have absolutely nothing to do with what you're paying in rent on the office side. And so if you're paying $75 a foot or you're paying $30, it's the exact same fee. But we'll do a stopwatch and we'll say, okay, what time are people usually allowed to leave, or what time do people usually leave? Okay, let's say it's 5:30. So we're sitting there, maybe having a cup of coffee, having a beer, something like that. And you watch people running out that door. And then you take them the next week to a client that trusted you, that followed you, that did it right. And it's 5:30. And you see someone get up and they're like, oh, here it comes. Now it starts. Now. And they go into the kitchen and they pour themselves a drink, or they pour themselves a cup of coffee, or they grab, a soda or whatever. And then they go back to their desk. And they're not always doing work, but that's okay. Sometimes they're just, BSing with each other and catching up or chatting, or, the more that you can have your team interact with each other in an environment that's positive and safe, you just get such a much higher level of productivity. And that distills itself down to recruiting, retaining, and all those different things. So that's really the part that we try so hard to educate and instill in our clients, because we know in the end, that's going to have the greatest impact on their business with regard to real estate.
Peter, you walk in and you'll see a space differently, obviously, from your clients, because you've seen so many spaces. You have a vision of what it could be for them. What are some cool things that you've done with spaces that maybe the client had no idea was even in the realm of possibility, or they didn't even think about when you look back at some of the projects you've done?
I mean, first and foremost, it's the common areas. So the kitchen, if you will, quote unquote, we call it the heartbeat of the space, heartbeat of the office. And what that's meant to really mean, it's not somewhere you go heat up your whatever lunch you brought and you go sit back at your cubicle, or sit back at your desk and eat your food. It's the accoutrements. In our office, we have a kegerator where we have the most unbelievable nitro coffee. And then we also have, under normal circumstances, a second tap, which is a keg of beer, if you will. We have a pretty much, tend to have a younger staff. But the kitchen is where we really want to start it. And then from there, we kind of grow out where we look at the common areas with regard to shared offices. The lactation room. The fact that people have not been doing that for 50 years to me is just asinine. As a young mother, you deserve to be comfortable in every way, shape, and form if you are coming back post, maternity leave and those kinds of things. We try to make sure that we focus on the location, the placement of certain rooms. So to give you a perfect example, a conference room. Most people would think, I always want my conference room to be very nice, up front, and near my receptionist. Sometimes they say, it needs to be near the kitchen because if we're going to be serving refreshments, whatever. Well, okay, that's fine. But just because it's been done that way forever doesn't mean that it's right. There are certain clients where they have this energy and this buzz and this just amazing environment atmosphere. When you walk in, you're like, whoa, what is going on in here? Sometimes you put that conference room on the other side of that, so further back in the office, because when you're bringing people in, that's infectious. You feel that. So if you're bringing in a prospect, it's the little details that really matter to us, and always trying to make sure that we think through as many scenarios as possible with regard to our clients.
I think, and Peter, you probably know better than me, but I think in the Walter Isaacson's book about Steve Jobs, he paid very particular attention to the layout and the space in the communal area.
Maniacal. He was maniacal about it to the point where he drove people nuts. I mean, he looked at architecture and space design with the same conviction as product design. I mean, his book is fascinating about that. I totally agree with you. You know, and to just mail it in or leave it in the hands of, you know, a building architect that you just say, okay, I need 7 offices, I need 2 conference rooms, and here you go. Those days are kind of gone, and they should be gone. And, you know, as leaders, we really screwed up, to be very candid. Prior to the pandemic, we got greedy. We stopped investing in the right things with our teams in the physical space. And it's like, well, wait a minute. No. We you know, the kitchens were cool, Pete. Like they had snacks, they had all this other stuff. That's true. But bench seating, 110 square feet per employee. I mean, I don't want to smell what you ate last night for dinner because I'm sitting so close to you. And by the way, you know, now post-pandemic, it's so obvious, but Jesus, how gross is that? You know, I don't want, you're sitting there blowing your nose and coughing and, you know, I mean, you got to treat your employees as human beings. Now, I'm happy and proud to say that we never followed that. You know, everybody that works for us, they have their own beautiful 6x6, you know, area. We've always allowed them to spread out. We've always treated them the way they should be. But that's kind of a cool revolution that we're undergoing right now. Leaders are being forced to reevaluate and to reinvest in their spaces to coax, and I'll use that, you know, the people back into the office. And it's been there's so much fun playing a role in helping to guide that.
Yeah, I want to talk about the landscape of commercial real estate. Have you seen a new normal now, or going back to what was before?
It is absolutely not going back to the way it was before for maybe ever. Maybe ever. You can't account for the technological shift that, you know, the pandemic really served as a catalyst for. Perfect kind of low-hanging fruit example. Take grandma. You know, grandma's grocery shopped her entire life, right? That's all that they ever knew. They are definitely a tech laggard. You know, they're not some early adopter. Well, pandemic hits, they're forced to figure out what, you know, Instacart, Amazon, whatever. Now, granted, there are things that you want to do that maybe you enjoy, but if you're one of those that hates going to the grocery store and you've now figured out, oh my gosh, the produce is fine, the food gets here when they say, they're not going back. Those efficiencies, those quality of life decisions are not going back. And I look at the office environment and the office experience the exact same way. If I had $1 for every time I've heard, you must be freaking out, you must be so worried about your career and your company, you guys are going to go out of business. So I said, I've never been worried about it one day in my life because we're human beings. That being said, we forecast probably 20 to 30% will not come back to the office and probably shouldn't. And a very, very simple example of that is I have what I consider to be one of the most phenomenal bookkeepers I've ever come across in business. I love her. I mean, I would sit there and go to dinner with her any night of the week she wanted to. I will sit and talk with her. I haven't seen her in 3 years. My books get done. They're perfect. There are times when, you know, she'll jump on my computer screen and we go through QuickBooks and we're looking at some things and making sure we're on the same page. And that's totally understandable, and that's okay. But what if you are a younger, aspiring leader, someone that's in creative, someone that's in sales, something that needs collaboration? What are you going to get on my calendar for 15 minutes on Zoom? No, we're going to lose a decade of leaders, of future leaders, if we don't get people back in the office, because coming back to that, the magic's the silence between the notes. When I walk out my office to go grab or fill up my water or do something, and I hear one of my young members, you know, she says something dumb or he says something dumb or it's misguided, I hear that instantly and I correct it instantly and we move on. You cannot manufacture and recreate that via Zoom, via phone call. And so leaders are having to really think through how they're designing their spaces, what they're putting in their spaces, What are they offering to get their teams back? Where are they going to be located? And I think we're going to be so much better for it when you forecast out 3-4 years from now, and a lot of these positive changes come, especially in the Chicagoland area, so long as we get the violence under control, because that is a very significant headwind that needs to be taken extremely seriously from not only the business community, which I think is, but from a complete and total civic leadership standpoint, because that is the number one issue that we are hearing about bringing people back to the office, is the fear of the commute.
You mentioned people saying, you must be worried. You did mention before we hit record there that you see some scary stuff looming.
I do. Scary for the landlords, especially in particular to the office market. We have a considerable, I don't want to call it a perfect storm, but there are some very large headwinds coming for a significant portion of the office landlord community in the Chicago area. You've got the combination of amazing new product coming on the market. You still have Lincoln Yards hanging out there, Project 78. You have the Bank of America building that just came on. You've got Salesforce Tower. You have BMO Harris. You look at what's transpired at the post office. We're becoming a very bifurcated market of have and have nots. Trophy towers, really great locations, high-end amenities. Those have been healthy and are continuing to kind of be stable. The buildings that are a bit more antiquated, that we're not, fully invested in. When you look at companies, whether it's they're downsizing, they're not renewing. I don't see a huge threat only from downsizing, because a lot of companies, to my earlier point, are actually spreading back out. But when you have a supply-demand imbalance, rates are going to drop. And why I call it, a wonderful bonanza for someone like myself, because I'm only on the tenant side, and we get to be heroes by having a lower cost of occupancy that we get to deliver on behalf of our clients. From a landlord standpoint, that's really scary. And then now really dig deeper and look at what's going on. I mean, the Fed just raised rates another 50 bips yesterday. There's talk that it might even be 75 come June. So if the lending markets become less favorable, which is unequivocally happening, you look at the CMBS markets tightening. When your mortgage comes due and you're 30% vacant, refinancing isn't what it used to be. And some of these landlords are going to write checks to get their debt to equity ratio back in balance. And some are going to throw back the keys. And you do that. That is a very, very painful process for a building and for that lender when you do either a deed in lieu of foreclosure or it goes into receivership, because someone as myself, we stop showing those buildings. There's too much uncertainty. So you lose that velocity. Someone as myself, we start calling those tenants in those buildings because sometimes the services go down and you relocate them. So there will be, a lot of relocations coming where as the cost of occupancy comes down, building, companies that were in lower kind of tier buildings are going to be able to move up, and still pay the same. Some are going to be able to just save a ton of money. So we are very bullish, very excited, and super pumped for our model. But there's definitely some problems coming for the kind of the more macro real estate environment, if you will.
Lots of choices for tenants there. I want to talk about what are the ideal characteristics of a client for you? Like what does that look like?
It's a tough question. We are predominantly industry agnostic. So we don't do anything in retail. Thank gosh, we are not good at that. But so long as it's an office or industrial user, whether they want to buy a building, they want to lease, it doesn't really matter. But privately held, typical revenues are between a smaller client, just they take $2 million a year in revenue, up to our largest client. Their holding company does about $7 billion, and it's not a lack of resources with regard to our abilities. It's It's much more the empathetic understanding as someone that has built a business that signs a rent check every month, those nuances of how you really drive not only the best deal from an economic, but just an overall value standpoint. And so if you're privately held and you have any of those, kind of questions or desires or needs with regard to your environment, that's who we get really excited to talk to.
What did you do, Peter, with New Hope Academy?
The New Hope Academy is one of those like truly greatest deals, feelings ever. So Dave and Brandy Lawrence, they are a therapy school. So you have a significantly larger than any of us would like part of the population where certain kids, for certain reasons, whether it be special needs, whether it be mental, whether it be, they don't fit in some of these schools, right? And these schools, they don't have the resources like a normal public school to be able to service this subset of children. And so we found Dave and Brandy in an old, just terrible kind of warehouse type building. It was a complete square peg round hole. They were going to put a gun range in across the street and down a block. And, so those deals are extremely hard to pull off. You have busing, you've got to do vehicle counts, you're going to have to get a zoning variance. And then how are you going to find a landlord that wants that use, knowing it's going to be a bit harder on your building than, say, post-grad professionals? And then you got to find a landlord that's going to actually want to pay for the construction. So we moved them. The space turned out so phenomenal. And their landlord, he deserves a ton of credit. He believed in them, and they needed each other. It worked out so well that 3 years after moving them in, they almost doubled in size again, based on how positive. And I'll be darned if they're not almost full. I mean, we're talking about the most vulnerable kids in our society, that they are the ones being the safety net and catching and educating and helping and bringing, stability and safety to. It's really darn impressive what they do and their commitment to the betterment of society and their businesses, quite frankly.
And then what about Rock, Fusco and Connolly? What did you do?
That's a cool one in that, they're an amazing law firm, a general practitioner. They specialize in a lot of different areas, but it's what I kind of consider, this was really like Rock, Fusco and Connolly 3.0. J Rock and Matt Connolly, they have taken over the firm. It's their time. They're growing quickly. They're investing in their people. They're investing in their practice. And it was time to invest in their space. And it was a very complex, it was a long process to get the right deal for them. They just moved in on Monday, and it's gorgeous. The location, the finishes, the build out, the views, without a doubt, I'm 100% confident it's going to have a very, very high positive impact on the things we talked about earlier, with their ability to poach and recruit in lawyers, their ability to have them stick around and bill more hours on a weekly basis and improve that cultural piece. And so I think there's a lot of wonderful things ahead for that firm. Moving is brutal. Everybody will tell you that's done it. And I know they're extremely happy to have it done.
Peter, with all you have going on with business and family, you are helping out with several organizations as well. Spina Bifida organization, the Daniel Murphy Scholarship. Talk about those for a second.
So Spina Bifida I was on, that was a while ago. That was my very first, what I'd consider executive board, Spina Bifida Association, Illinois. Equestrian Connection was, and probably will forever be, my baby. I was on that board for 10 years. I was president for 4. It's just an amazing facility up in unincorporated Lake Forest, 16 acres, 20 indoor horse stalls outside. I believe they now have about 8. It's hippotherapy, so you're linking up disabled children and adults, physically disabled, mentally disabled, with horseback riding. And the impacts on people, we can't even go into it. Just some of the outcomes that I've personally seen. I've been on the board for 4 years of Daniel Murphy Scholarship Fund, where we help underprivileged middle school children get scholarships to high school. So we're right around 500 scholars right now. It's a really impressive organization. After 4 years, I'm actually going to be rolling off of that and going to take a little bit of time for my family. But the other one that's super near and dear to my heart is Clearbrook, where they serve 8,000 special need families in Illinois. It's about a $55 million a year operating budget, placing predominantly adults in SILAs. So a SILA is a home where you would live with 3 other, typically if it's a 4-bedroom, 3 other special needs adults, 24-hour care, and you're trying to recreate as close to a normal living environment as possible versus one roof, 50 people, feeling more like a retirement home type situation. They also have amazing day programs for children, for adults. They just had their gala last Friday. It's a really great place. No different than Misericordia, if you will.
Peter, I have one last question, or a combination of there's a part A and part B to this last question. But before we get to it, I just want to thank you. This has been amazing to hear your expertise and the stories. And I want to point people to your website, which is bespokecre.com. Are there any other places online we should point people to?
Yeah, I'm laughing. Sorry. We're going through our whole website redo as we speak. No, I mean, just we're regular people, and if there's one lesson I've learned in business, it's not what you spend on marketing. It's not what you say it is. It's what the people you respect. It's what your clients, right? That's your reputation is what they say it is. And so I think you have to have nice marketing materials and look professional, but ultimately we can't do our jobs without getting in the room with our clients and our prospective clients, because we need to see it, touch it, feel it. And, we meet with a lot of people, and that's a wonderful part of our job.
Yeah. Check out bespokecre.com. So last question, Peter, sports also mimics a lot about life and business. And I think I was reading about you online the other day. I think someone from Oregon State, tied a record that you set there of 15 shutout. I don't remember the exact number, but you had 15 plus shutouts. I don't know if it was in a row or what it was, but I wanted to hear the most memorable game that you had on the bad side and then on the good side, because sometimes we learn our biggest lessons from the bad ones and they stick with us. So I want to hear the bad game, and I want to hear the good game when you look back on your career as a soccer player.
Wow. The bad one is it doesn't leave. It doesn't leave you. I can tell you that. It still bothers me after all these years. Even it's truly kind of laughable. I mean, it's 2002 in the NCAA tournament. Heath Pierce, who was the left back for Portland, just more or less was clearing the ball. It was right before halftime, and in hindsight, it was probably a little laissez-faire. And my defender had told me, it was away, and I'll be dang, but this thing just dropped out of the sky into the upper 90, almost like on a vertical, and it was a goal, and it was by far the worst goal of my career to have given up. And I think that the big takeaway from it is humility. I was a wreck that night, and you feel like you let your entire team down, and all those countless hours of work and preparation and just, the true investment. I think I'm better for it, but I would be lying if I said that that's a lesson I really would prefer to have not learned. And certainly not that way. And then, from a positive experience, there's a lot there. I mean, we had a special team. We really got it going my senior year, where we ended up finishing second in the Pac-10, which was kind of arguably the second best conference in the country. Probably beating Stanford my senior year in overtime at home, because we beat them on the road and at home my junior and senior year, both times, where they absolutely shellacked us my freshman and sophomore year. So anytime you can get one over on
redemption.
Them, yeah, they UCLA and Stanford played for the national championship my sophomore year. So it was not a lot of fun to lead the Pac-10 in saves all 4 years. I mean, I definitely know what it's like to be shelled, to say the least.
Peter, first of all, thank you. Everyone check out bespokecre.com and more episodes of the podcast. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like $100 grand.